Well, Tony Quinn, welcome to the program. On the opening page of your biography, there's a great quote from your grandfather, Paddy Quinn, who said, if you're going to tell a story, make it a good one. And there's none better, in my opinion, than this one in terms of life and in business. Perhaps let's start with your background, if we could. Your family's origins largely trace back from Ireland through to Canada and then eventually to Scotland. Walk us through a little bit about the Quinn family, if you could.
Well, I don't know much about the Quinn family. In fact, my youngest daughter is embarking on a challenge right now about this ancestry thing. And she wants us to go as far, well, her daughter, my granddaughter in New Zealand, wants to go as far back as she possibly can. So that's a bit of a challenge. I only know, like most people, I know what my mum and dad came from, where they were. My grandparents, yeah, a little bit, but not much. So, and that was the whole point of writing the book, was to sort of give some guidance to the future generations. But a funny story about my father, he was a postman, telegraph boy, and in the time after the Second World War, before I was born, you had to do 2 years of national service in the army. So he joined the army, and he actually got into the dog division, the dog division, SAS dog division thing. And they were working on all sorts of things with dogs, which was quite interesting. But when he'd served his 2 years, he went to the front desk, I don't know, and said, here's my papers, I'm out, I'm going home. And the sergeant behind the desk said, what are you doing here? And Dad said, no, I'm going home. I've done my time. I'm going home. And the sergeant said, you were born in Canada. You didn't have to do national service. So does that paint the picture of the Quinn family? Like, we probably do too much that we're not expected to do. I'm not sure.
So your dad, Jimmy Quinn, had an interesting life, as you've explained there. He was a obedience trainer, served in the SAS, I think, as a paratrooper as well, and then held down various jobs and eventually ended up into the pet food delivery business. How did all of that come about?
So the reason that he got into pet food was because when he was the youngest dog obedience champion in Britain at the time, well known. And of course, people would say to him, what do you feed your dogs? Thinking that there's something in the food, It's like if I said to Jim Richards, or SVG, what tires are you using? I'd be thinking it's the tires that are doing it, So people would think, oh, it's the food, there's something in the food. And he would just say, boiled up some cheeks and some rice. And people would say, oh, can I buy some or get some from you? And Dad, being Dad, would say, yeah, no problem. And he wasn't a good businessman. I mean, a great fella, but not a good, but hadn't been trained in business at all. So he basically, if it cost him $4 or £4, he'd sell it for £4. And then he'd think, oh, I need to get a bit more, so he'd sell it for $4.50. The reality is he should have sold it for £8, But he didn't. So he his first 10 years in business, he never had a bank account. He had no training whatsoever. And obviously he met Mum, and they were a great couple. I learned a lot from their failings. As far as business failings go, growing up, I could see that the way that Dad did things wasn't right, wasn't commercially sensible. In fact, one of his friends once said to me, a guy called Ronnie McCulloch, he said, mate, your father would be so wealthy if he had just applied some decent business ideals to how he did things. And I always remember that. And my dad was he wasn't a dreamer, but he was a creator. He was creative, and he didn't stick to the plan. If he found a product that worked or sold, he would think he could improve it. Instead of just consolidating that product, just letting it run its course. And then maybe in 2 years' time, change the packaging or change it up a wee bit. But if it's selling and growing, I can leave it. You don't tamper with it. But Dad would always fiddle with it and really change things. And he had a product, Jesus, he had a product called, a brand called Fred Snoggleboggle. And his strapline, because you can get away with things back then, Fred Snoggleboggle, the biggest name in pet food. Well, it was the biggest name, but so he was a very creative sort of guy. Loved the theatre. He would have been a great director. Do you know what I mean? Meeting new people all the time and stuff. He was really good. Whereas mum came from a very sort of labour orientated business, you know, solid, salt of the earth kind of people. And she was always counting the pennies. And, Dad was spending the money. He was spending next year's profits today. He was going like that. And Mum had to pay the wages and had to pay for things and stuff. So I saw the two opposite sides of business, simple business. Dad was creating the thing and Mum was trying to pay the bills. And somewhere in the middle there is, I think, where I learned the most, of my skills. And people say to me nowadays, well, what are you? Depends on what context that is, how I answer that. But, I consider myself a conservative entrepreneur. Like, I like to take a risk, because where there's risk, there's reward, but only if it's a calculated risk. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's been part of my success anyway. And my biggest critic in the whole world was my dad. And he meant it in such a loving, challenging way, as dads should. All this talk about quality time and this wokeness that the world's going crazy on. A father's role is to challenge his children, is to make it tough for them, because he wants them to survive in the outside world when he's not there to protect them. That's Mother Nature at work. And my dad was absolutely, I used to catch up with him every week, take him out for dinner or whatever. And he loved the whole business politics of what I was doing and how I was getting things, who I was dealing with and stuff. And, in his latter years, he was so proud of me, but he would never tell me that. He would never say that to me. He'd tell everybody else, but he'd never. And, that's just a good old fashioned, dad of that generation. Worked hard, worked way too hard for for his rewards, But that's what he knew. That's what he did. So I don't know if that's answered the Quinn thing, but we, as a family, still to this day, we have a very strong work ethic. And, I'd like to see that continue until I die anyway. And then when I die, it doesn't matter, does it, really?
Let's talk about your background. Born in 1957 in Aberdeen in Scotland, one of three children initially, and then Sinclair came along later in life. The family shifted around quite a bit in those early days, living in a caravan and in different places. You recognise that kids, this wasn't a normal upbringing. Most kids were growing up in houses or flats, but you were in a caravan and quite comfortable in that caravan. Tell us about what you can recall.
Well, it wasn't a caravan. I think sounds luxurious. It was a wooden caravan. It was like what we would call a gypsy, a pikey caravan. And there was myself, my two sisters, and my mum and dad. Of course, there wasn't an ensuite or a toilet even within the caravan. It was basically one room and then a couple of bedrooms that, and it was, but I have to tell you, I have zero bad memories. No abuse as a child. I've got none of those stories for you. It was good. My mum and dad were very clean people, and so were we, and so am I. I'm a clean freak. I think that's great. And I don't care where people live, so long as it's clean. I don't care. You can live in the corner under a bridge. If you've got it clean and organised, good on you. You can live in a big fancy house. If it's clean, happy days. Better if you're cleaning it yourself. If you've got cleaners cleaning it, not so good. So I went from this wooden caravan until I was 14 years old. My dad did extend it. It became a double the size. It was like, the first caravan, there's a picture of it in the book, was 20 feet, which is a container, small container. And then he extended it when we'd sort of settled to 40 feet. So he just added a bit on the end. Still no toilet. It was an outside toilet. But it was good, mate. It was no problems. I mean, I think we had BBC One, and if the stars were right, we could get BBC Two on the TV. So I went to school, obviously, and all the kids had more television channels. They had commercial channels that had Batman and Thunderbirds and, Man from Uncle on it. And I used to pretend that I knew what they were talking about because you didn't want to. And I was pretty clever at school. I didn't do much homework or anything. I liked chasing girls. I thought that was good as I got older. But so I didn't have to do much work at school. I was naturally I found education quite easy. I didn't like it. I didn't like school, partly because my friend at the time lived in a 16-room mansion, right? Because I managed to pass a test to get into a fancy school, right? But shouldn't have done it, but anyway, did it because it meant that my mum and dad had to pay fees, and they shouldn't have done it. We shouldn't have done it. Anyway, I passed the test, got in there. My best mate, Gus Hamilton, lived in this big house, So I went to his house to play, I can do that. And then the next week I'd say, oh, you come to my house to play. I thought nothing of it, mate. I was totally oblivious to social understandings. And so when he came to my house, we played, it was fine, no problem. Yeah. But on Monday at school, all of a sudden I was being called the gypsy. So I had to live with that. And the gypsy in the UK at the time, the gypsies were the thieves and vagabonds and troublemakers and stuff. So I kind of fought my way through. I was a little fella, but I didn't take it lying down. I kind of fought my way through. I started to dislike school. And I guess in a subconscious way, that was me starting to experience social behavior in people, It was fine before we saw where we lived, and then all of a sudden it changed.
You've said previously, unlike most people, my earliest memories aren't of school but of work. You're working in the family business, I think, weighing and bagging mincemeat from the age of about 5. Tell us about that.
So, of course, most kids at school go to play sport on a Saturday morning. I could never get there because we were working. And I enjoyed work. I didn't think it was bad at all. As I say, I sort of preferred older people's company as well. I don't know, but it was work at my dad's factory. You didn't get paid for it. It was just expected, and you became good at it. I was a good worker and contributed well, and I was going to go on to in senior school. I easily got university entrance. And so I was going to go to be an architect, actually. That's what I fancied being, an architect, because I could visualize things. When I drew things, I could visualize what it would look like and stuff. And so I quite fancied architecture. Coming from a wooden caravan, I thought, we can do better. And there was never an opportunity really to work in the factory. It was like, I don't know, you were just expected that you would just carry on and go to school. It was the start of that further education push by parents. Prior to that, the generation before, you left school and you went to work. And only if you were going to be a lawyer or doctor, you stayed at school. Whereas my generation, I guess, they were starting to push kids into universities and further education more so. And so, I wasn't being pushed, but I thought, I'm going to be an architect. And we had summer recess. And at the beginning, and I'd just go and work in the factory, that's what you do. But my dad got seriously unwell with brucellosis because we were dealing with dead cows and dead animals and stuff. And he got a disease called brucellosis. And he spent 3 weeks in bed, which was most unusual. I remember being called up to his bedroom, and you don't do that as a teenager. You don't go to your parents' bedroom. It's like all sorts of weird shit goes on in there, and you just don't want to be there. Anyway, I called, and he was lying in his bed, and it's a bit of a, and he said, "Oh, look, I'd like you to go and work in the factory." And I went, "Yeah, okay." So what? And we'll pay you. Well, hang on, what? We'll pay you. And it was £20 a week. And I'm going to tell you that, my friends that would be working at the grocery store or McDonald's, not that there was McDonald's then, but, the fish and chip shop or whatever, they'd be on £10 a week, £12 a week. So £20 a week was good money. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. And of course, then I never went back to university, because that was, I was making money. And once you start making money, once any young person starts making money, it's a bit of a life changer, because you've actually got your own money. You don't understand tax. That's not fair. How does that work? Why are we doing that? Once you get over that bit of it, you actually get your own money, and you can actually spend it on your own stuff. And so that was a life changer for me. And at that time, I was chasing girls, and then I learned how to got my license. I could drive when I was 10 years old or 7 years old, but I got my license for the road. And so I got a pay rise. This is a year later. So got a pay rise to £25 a week, because I could drive, and I could go and pick up the dead cows, take them back, chop them up. So I could do everything then, and it was like 7 days a week. You may as well do that. So my dad knew how to extract, the maximum amount of people. But it was the days of, that was how the days were then, and there was no hardship. There was no, if you look back, you could certainly make a case of, we were poor and hardship, and no, we got fed, got a bed, we stayed in a good place. It was fine.
Give us a sense of some of those jobs that you were working on. This wasn't your sort of stereotypical factory work. It was going out, picking up dead cows, chopping them up, getting the guts and the blood and the meat from them. Give us a sense of what that was like.
Well, I'll leave that for the people to imagine. There's nothing glorious about it. It's just warfare, basically. The hardest animal to I don't know how to say this nicely, but to dispose of is a pig, actually, because we didn't have rifles. We had pistols that just put out a bolt, a captive bolt thing, that just knocked a hole in their head, and then you had to take a wire and put it down their spinal cord, kill the nerve. So it was humane, but it wasn't that humane, I didn't think. The worst animals to kill, the ones that I feel really bad about, is horses. Horses know from 100 meters away what's going on. They're like dogs. They've got a sense of intuitiveness about the situation. Cows wouldn't have an idea. Boom, gone. Sheep, they're stupid. Pigs are awful. But horses were terrible. And, we had to do the odd horse. Interestingly, in my life in pet food in Australia and New Zealand, I never, ever used horse meat. Never. Because of the reason that I knew that they were close to human. That was spooky. That wasn't right to use horse meat. I know that many countries and companies do use horse meat, but I didn't like it at all. But so just blood and guts in the back of a man. And it's quite funny because you get used to it, right? And this is back in the days where things were wild and free. And you'd maybe go out and you'd get 3 or 4 cow and sheep in the back of a truck. But the trucks were open trucks, like they had sides on them, but they were kind of open, right? So sometimes you'd have to go through town, through the city to get through the town, It was the shortest way. It was quite funny. You didn't think about it at the time, but there was these people in double-decker buses, right? So the top story of the bus is looking out You see these dead animals. and, and another memory of that day is you'd be away out in the country somewhere picking up dead cow and fucking sheep and pig, fucking whatever it is, and you're starving. So you'd go into the shop, right, to buy a Mars bar and a drink or something, sandwich, something, and you were generally kind of bloodied up, right? You know, there's a bit of blood, you know, thing. And looking back, you know, must have been a few older women behind the counter going, this guy's just murdered somebody. But no, I was never arrested, never done anything wrong. Yeah.
By this time, we're now in the late 1970s, and your Q Waste business was thriving. You were still, I think, 20 years of age, and you've said previously, Dad lived his life on Struggle Street, and I was determined not to make the same mistakes. Take us inside the launch of the Q Waste business. I think it was a disagreement that you had with your father that spawned that. What was it, and how were you able to scale that?
Yeah, look, there was I worked for my dad for 2 years, right? And during that time, there was a lot of discussions, arguments, you might say, about how to run a business, because I was starting to form my views of how the things could make more money or be better run. But my dad was, you know, and so we had many discussions, and it came to a point, I was still on 25 quid a week. It came to a point where Dad said, excuse me, you know how to run a business better than me. You think you know better than me. You fucking know. He said, I'll tell you what, you take the byproduct side of it and you show me how you're going to run a business, how you make money. Now, he knew he was making no money out of it, right? He couldn't get anybody to do it because it was the shittiest, dirtiest, grubbiest job in the whole place, right? So you're taking all the bones and fat and guts and heads and hooves and bits and pieces and putting them into a crusher and then putting them into a cooker. That all sounds exotic. It was a lot of manual stuff, and then cooking them up for a couple of hours, 3 hours, and then taking it out, rendering the fat out, doing it separate, you know, and then putting it into a truck. It was the worst job in the whole place, the smelliest job in the whole place, the worst. And it was worth nothing, right? So these commodities, meat and bone meal and tallow, go in a cycle. They can be up here one day and be worth a lot of money. People make a lot of money, and it can be down here. Like if this is the survival line, you know, it goes in and out of that on a 4-year cycle usually, right? So anyway, we were here. And he'd had enough. He fucking couldn't get anybody to do it. Da, da, da. So he thought, fuck you go and show me how to do it. You know, clever move, right? So the first week that I was in business on my own, I made a profit of £132. And I thought, I've just been working for 25. Okay, I've had to do a bit more, but I've fucking made 5 times more. This is fucking great. And like I was saying with the curve, it was coming like this, right? So it went like this, and it went really well. So my first 2 years at QS for a couple of years, marvelous. I had more money in the bank than my dad had ever seen. I bought my mum the first microwave in Scotland or some bloody thing, and I didn't pay board because I stayed with him still, but I bought my mum furniture and stuff because, you know, they didn't want to take money for board. But and ever since then I've been looking after my mum and dad. But there's something good about giving to your family anyway, and giving to your mum and dad's pretty good. And so, you know, like I had a brand new car and Dad was still running about in an old car. And it's like, this is business, Dad. This is how you do it, right? And it's a bit of a story, and I don't think we've got enough time, but my dad wanted it back. After 2 years, he said, fuck, I need this back. There was no contract, there was no nothing, right? He just said, I need it back because I need to make your money. You should go away and do something else, right? Okay. Whew, tough times. And anyway, I thought that I would go up to the north of Scotland and do a similar thing up there. So I did that. I did the plans for that. spend a bit of money on that. In the meantime, I was with my friend, I was buying crash cars and cutting them in half and joining them together and cutting shut and did it, and I was making good money. It was all right. But I was coming downstairs from the draftsman's place, past the accountant, the family accountant, who knew the family well, and he said, Anthony, he called me Anthony. Anthony, yeah, what are you doing? Oh, I'm fixing up cars. Da, da, da. He said, would you like to be involved in the sign industry? I don't know. I don't know. He said, well, a client of mine's just died. His family are not interested in the business. They're going to sell the business. I think it's a reasonable business. Maybe you would like to run it. I said, okay, I'll do that. And at that point, I worked out that every year people are given at least one opportunity, maybe 5. And the brave people go, the brave and not so stupid people go, yep, okay, I'll do that. But most people go, nah, I've got to get home to make the kids lunches or whatever the fuck it is. So I think as fate has it, as whatever it is that drives this whole machine, every so often they give you an opportunity and it's yours to grab and then make something of it. And so anyway, I bought this sign business. I knew nothing about signs. Nothing. But it was a good deal. It was £32,000 for the freehold and the business. The business had 2 guys working in it and an old lady in the office that was she was done. So I took this business on, and the very first day this fisherman came in for some cut boards, and Jean in the office, because it was a 3-week, you have to wait 3 weeks, Jean came out and she was being a bit smart. She became a lovely person, great friend, great employee. But anyway, she came out of the office. She said, there's a customer here wanting these fishing cutting board things. And I said, yeah. I said, have we got the material? I mean, have we got, yes, we got, yeah. And she says, when should I tell them to come back? Yeah, she was thinking 3 weeks, I said, well, tell them to come back in an hour. They'll be ready in an hour. And she went, an hour? What, today? An hour? I said, yeah, I'll cut them now. I'll do it now. And she was like, okay. And so I took that business again, another trick. If it can be done, do it. I'm fucking 3 weeks. It took half an hour to cut the board, not 3 weeks. But you can do it if you can do it. Customer service, they're going to come back for more, blah, blah, blah. But so I took that business to 27 staff. It was the biggest. It was the biggest in Scotland. I couldn't believe that I was making more money than Maggie Thatcher was getting. I thought, fuck, how does that work? I fucking love sick. But we were really moving, and the Americans were in town, right? So whenever the Americans are in town, hallelujah, let's make some money, because the Americans love money and they love to get service. So if you can provide them with whatever they want, they will pay you. That's how it works, right? And I was one of the early adopters of that system. And there was a few other young guys in Aberdeen that did the same, that became very wealthy very quickly, because we fucking provided a service to these customers. And I'll give you an example that puts things in perspective. So before computers and before barcodes, right, everything had to be labeled. So everything that went onto an oil rig had to have what they call a unique number tag. So they strapped it to the thing, and that was it, right? That was the documentation. So the guy came in this day and said, how much for that? And it was like a key ring with a unique number, 6 digits, right? And he says, how much for that? I said, oh, I don't know. And I'm thinking, by the time I set up the machine, get it done, £1, I'm doing you a favour, £1, £1. He says, oh yeah, okay. No, was it? Whatever. Well, a couple of weeks later, an order came in for 50,000 unique number tags, right? And I'll go, He never said that. I feel so embarrassed, like at £1 each, £50,000. The things would fit in a fucking box this big, like, you know. And I went, oh no, that's not right. And so here's a point in time as well. Do you phone the customer up and say, look, been a mistake? Yeah, it's not £1. They're 10p or 5p or something, you know what I mean? And have a good relationship with the customer, right? And, you know, you might get some credit points for that. Or do you sit back and go, okay, so the deal's been done. They're quite happy at £1. They're happy to supply. We've won the order. We should just accept it and take the windfall. So that's what I did. I erred on that side of the thing. And that was the first of 3 orders. Incredible when those guys come to town. So what happened after 2 years of that, I built up this business that was booming, and the union, with an electrician that was a sign erector, and he was a bit unionized, you know, and he wanted to, he had his own rules of how things were done, and we didn't have time for that because we were the biggest, but we were also the keenest, fastest, you know, we were on the money, we were doing the business. And I just got the shits with the whole thing. And my young sister had emigrated to Australia at the same time, you know. And I've got this Coronation Street house, and she's got a house in Ivanhoe in Melbourne with a swimming pool and stuff. How does that work, you know? Anyway, as it happens, I was talking to the guy in Chevron, and in the late 70s, the whole world was oil. Everybody talked oil. People were traveling the world, discovering oil and processing oil in Singapore, Malaysia, you know, America. Everybody's going oil, Middle East oil, North Sea. Oh, fuck yeah. So I said to the guy in Chevron, I said, where are you guys going next? Like, where you going? He said, oh, we're going to Australia, Western Australia. Oh, okay. Okay. So I went home to the wife and said, hey, we're going to go to Perth in Western Australia. And I said, we're going to go to Perth. And she says, why? Because there's a town in Scotland called Perth. She said, why? I said, no, we're going to Perth, Australia. And why? I said, that's where we're going. That's where the next boom's going to be. So that's what happened. Christina was 7 months pregnant when we left the UK. We left on the last day that she could fly. I sold the sign business in 2 hours, picked up the phone to the opposition and said, hey, do you want this business? Job done. So we flew out and people need to grasp that there was no Google, there was no Wi-Fi, there was nothing. If you wanted to learn something, you should have listened at school, or you need to go to the library and find something out. That was how it was done. So landed in Perth at midnight nearly, and that's it. The new adventure starts. You can't make a return trip because the wife's pregnant. So, and then a big reset happened. Big reset. It wasn't the same. You know, when you go to a different country, even if they speak the same language, you don't know who a good doctor is, you don't know who a good lawyer is, you don't know who a good accountant is. You've got to start again. There's only 2 people who will talk to you, 2 groups of friends that you've got. One is a second-hand car sales thing, because you've got to buy a car, so they all talk to you. But once you've bought a car, you've lost half your friends, right? The other group of people that will speak to you is real estate people, because you want to rent somewhere. But once you've got a car and you've rented somewhere, that's it, you're on your own. And there was many nights where I cried, physically cried, because I'd made a bad move. The oil didn't come to Perth. It was in Port Hedland in Karratha, which was fucking 3 days away. And so, although Perth is a beautiful place and lovely city, I'm sure that I was clinically depressed there. I didn't know it at the time, but I was definitely depressed and quite. And I understand people that go to a new adventure country, whatever, and then, oh, fuck, this is not right, and they want to go back home. I totally sympathise with that. And it was probably a foolish thing to do, but it was a great learning curve, and ultimately has been the best thing. I mean, I would have been wealthy if I'd stayed in Scotland. I'm sure of that. But ultimately, for the children and the family and the lifestyle that we've enjoyed, coming to Australia was by far the best move of my young career.
I want to ask you, because it's such a pivotal point in your life and in your business career. You landed in Perth, I think, in early August 1980. You'd had a pretty much a dream run with QAce and with Loftus and Co-Signs. You arrive in Perth thinking you'd be able to emulate the success that you had. Like you said, Perth, and particularly Perth in the 1980s, would have been a very different place. Full of all sorts of people. You got into the signwriting business, or you hoped to get into the signwriting business, saw how competitive that was. Then you had Vitadrop, then you got into the arcade. Oh, Vitaproof. Yeah, Vitaproof.
Proven thing, which seems strange to rust-proof vehicles in Perth, but there was a fair bit of business with the mines and stuff like that. But that was a con. I was conned into that business because in Scotland, your ethics and loyalties are quite high. In Perth in the early 80s, I mean, Alan Bond was king, I think. There was a lot of scoundrels, and I foolishly trusted people, which I'd done all my life, but it shouldn't have been done. And you know, I learned some valuable lessons in Perth. So every trip of every bit of the journey, you got to learn things and then hopefully not repeat the mistakes. You know, and Perth was, I was glad to get out of Perth. I knew that mentally it wasn't where it needed to be. I just didn't connect with it. Yeah. And it's a lovely place. You know,
You said in the book that you then relocated to New Zealand in 1984. You didn't go to the east coast of Australia because you thought that would be basically the same as the west coast. Tell us about the early years in New Zealand, which were equally as challenging as the time in Perth.
I love New Zealand, mate. I think New Zealand is probably, if there is a God's country, I think New Zealand is. The only downfall that New Zealand has against Australia is that economically, commercially, the Kiwis have to work hard for the money. And from what I see, what I have seen, is that the lucky country Australia, right? The government has got it so good, and therefore people have got it so good, because we just go out to the desert, we dig up some shit, you know, earth stuff, put it on a train, send it overseas. The government collects the royalty. BHP and Fortescue collect the fucking profit, and everybody's happy because there's all this money coming from something that cost us nothing, right? Nobody planted it. Nobody watered it for 100 years. Nobody looked after it. And nobody is replanting it. So this current generation, the generation before, and possibly the generation after, are going to take, you know, they're going to rape Australia of its minerals and sell it off. And we're going to have a great life in Australia currently. So Australia's got that natural wealth, right? Problem is we're not reinvesting it properly, right? New Zealand, they don't have that. They have to work hard for every penny they get. So they've got tourism, forestry, milking cows. It's a tough gig in New Zealand. And I find the work ethic in New Zealand better than Australia. I like the weather in New Zealand. It's not so severe, not so harsh. I love the food, and most of all, I like the clean toilets. I have a passion about toilets, and in my later years, and always have had, to be honest, which stems back to the hygiene thing. You know, if you're a clean freak, you like good toilets, right? And in Australia, I talk about the toilets around the world. You can generally tell a country, you know, the status of a country by the status of its public toilet. And, you go to Japan, best toilets ever. The last thing you do as you're leaving Japan is go to the toilet because it's just a marvelous experience, right? You go to England, the bloody toilets there, the motorway toilets in England are just the absolute lowest of the low. You go to Germany, you go to the public toilets in Germany, they've got machines that clamp down on the top and the thing goes round and gets washed and sanitized. What does that say about the people? Really good. You go to America, and I love America too. But you go to America, you've got a lake. There's a lake in the pot that you have to deal with, right? Like in New Zealand, Australia, there's a bit of water at the bottom of the bowl that you're aiming for, right? In America, you've got this lake that you do your business in, right? It's like, wow, there's surplus of water in America. And then I love the recoil. It's like, I hate gardens, but it's when you flush in America. When you flush, it's like got this bang, this recoil that comes back at you. And this water, this business, whoosh. And I reckon it goes to Mexico. I reckon that's the purpose of Mexico. It all goes to Mexico. Gets the hell out of America. But anyway, in Australia, you got a public toilet here. You go down to the toilets here at the cafe, right? Can I go to the toilet? Yeah. They'll give you a spade, a garden spade on the end, a key, and it's got a big kitchen spoon or something on it. So off you go. Everybody knows you're going to the toilet. It's like the walk of shame, like off you go. In New Zealand, right? Public toilets everywhere. Every cafe has got a toilet, so you're not under stress or anything.
Over the course of the next 10 years of your time in New Zealand, you launched a number of ventures that were very successful, Fast Fry Chips and Fat Man Limited. We'll skip over those just in the interest of time, or maybe just give us a sort of a quick synopsis of how you got into the waste fat collection business or the oil business and the reasons behind why those businesses were successful.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story, that one, but basically we were supplying edible fats to the chip shops. The chip shops were blaming the fat for going off too quickly. We were blaming the chips that were made in Auckland. So we started making our own chips. And I remember I borrowed like 30 grand from the bank. Because in those days, like that was a lot of money. Borrow 30 grand from the bank. And I said to them, in memory, if I can make 3 ton a week within the first 12 months, I'll be able to pay you back, and That was the business plan on a piece of paper. Anyway, within 3 weeks, I think it was, we were doing 7.5 ton a week. Oh my God. Like the demand was so much more than I thought. And so here's another lesson in life. Instead of going to the bank and saying, listen, that 30 grand, that was not enough. I need 150 to make this thing work, right? I didn't do that, right? I thought, I can't go back. I've just got to work away with what I've got. So I worked away with an overdraft that in those days, the overdraft was like 16% interest. So I worked away with an overdraft to build this business up and got over all the mountains that you have to climb and do stuff like that. And it became very successful, right? It wasn't very profitable because the guys in Auckland were coming up to our region and selling their bags for $2. Like a bag of chips in Auckland's $10. Up in north, it's $8. Right? So we're competing with $8. Silly, right? I went to the MP, John Banks, and said, mate, is this right? Can they do that? Yeah, politicians. I thought, this is what they're for, sort things out. No, that was a waste of time. Oh, it's a geographical thing, whatever. Anyway, so we started sending our chips into Auckland. So just that normal competitive spirit stuff. Anyway, this guy, Graham Edwards, who was one of my influencers. Nowadays people have got Instagram influencers and whatever they do, but Graham Edwards influenced me a bit. He educated me a bit. And so he ran Mr. Chips in Auckland. So he phoned me up. It's funny how fate deals you cards. he phoned me up. He says, "Oh, I've got a farm in Dargaville. I come up to every couple of weeks. I was going to call in past your place on Friday night, and I'll leave Auckland. I'll call in past Friday night. If you're there, I'd like to have a chat." I said, "Yeah." And I've always, here's another trick in life, always talk to your opposition. Always be welcoming to your opposition. You'll find out much more if you converse with them. And you can, if you're smart enough, you can psychologically fuck them in the head if you're smart enough, right? Anyway, I said, yeah, come and see it. So he came in, the first thing he said, "I'm not here to buy you out." Well, he may as well put a sign on his chest saying, "I'm here to buy you out." So anyway, there was a couple of months went backwards and forth, and anyway, he bought me out. Paid $250,000 for it, for the business, and he was smart. He paid 100 grand, and he got the distributor to pay 150. Yeah, there's all these tricks and deals that you learn throughout your life that make it easier to do and easier to achieve, and is good for everybody, you know. So anyway, that happened, and I remember I got $100,000 up front, and that paid all my overdraft and debt, and I had money in the bank, and you know, it was good. I started renovating the house, you know, I think, oh, how good is this? Because his deal was 100 grand up front and then 50 grand every 6 months for 18 months, which was really good for me, because it allowed me time to think what I was going to do. So I ended up with a factory that was 3/4 empty, because they didn't look at the equipment, they didn't care, they just get rid of it. So I ended up with this factory that was 3/4 empty, and we were doing some edible fats at this end, and when you make edible fats, you end up with meat fractions, which are like crackle, you know. And we used to sell that to a pet food company in Auckland. Fucking happy days, right? I wasn't sure what to do. And I swore I would never get into the pet food business, because my dad was in the pet food business. I'd done other things. I'd made much more money than Dad did. So why would you go into the pet food business? So anyway, a new manager started at the pet food business, phoned me up and said, "Oh, this product that you're sending down to us, about 3-4 ton a week." He says, "Oh, look, it's not worth 25 cents a kilo. I'm only going to pay you 17 cents, right?" So here's him. He's joined the firm. He said, "I'll make a difference to the bottom line. I'll cut some cost." You know, pretty fucking easy tactic, right? If you get away with it. I says, "Mate, you're kidding me, aren't you?" He says, "No." I said, "Mate, by the time I make it, package it, freeze it, freight it to Auckland, I'm losing money at 70. I'm not even making money at 25. Yeah, I was looking for more. You know, no. I'm only paying you 17. I said, "Mate, I may as well make my own pet food, for God's sake. You know, that's just stupid." He said, "Oh, pet food's not so easy to make." You know, I said, "Mate, I grew up in it. Please spare me the the sales talk or pitch or whatever." I said, "No." I said, "If you're going to stick like that, I'm going to make my own pet food." "Oh, you can't do that." And that was the birth of the pet food business in New Zealand. And we very quickly grew that. I'm going to say a couple of years, whatever, but it became quite synonymous. It was quite very, very successful. So much so that a guy called Roger Willoughby from Big Fresh, who were the Hong Kong dairy company, they'd opened 11 stores in New Zealand, and we were supplying them. He said, "Look, I want you to go to Australia and have a look at, you know, I want you to export your product from New Zealand into Australia." And this was this fresh, chilled pet food, you know, it's not even in Australia, like, you know. And so he said, "I want you to go to Sydney and have a look at the first store that we've opened in Leichhardt, Sydney." I said, "Oh, okay." So me and the wife hadn't been on holiday for years. So we went to Sydney. Now, our eyes, so it came from Perth to sleepy New Zealand, and now we're heading back to Sydney for a long weekend. Wow. And for whatever reason, we stayed near King's Cross. There was women with coats that sprung open as cars passed, and I thought, wow, what a place this is. This is awesome. I want to come to Australia. So that's exactly what happened. But Christina had said, if we're going to go to Australia, if we're moving again, we need to go where our family is, which was the Gold Coast. My parents had ended up here. So, Gold Coast, I want to go to Sydney. Anyway, we sold up in New Zealand. Again, it took very, very short space of time, sold it, because it's good business, And yet again came to Australia and started a new adventure in pet food, which was to educate the Australian public about fresh, chilled pet food, which was a monumental task.
Let's talk about VIP Petfoods. You launched it in 1994. First products rolled out of the factory in 95. You sold it in 2015 for 410 million to Quadrant Private Equity, or 85% of it for 410 million. Just talk us through the early days of getting the product off the ground here in Australia, and then perhaps some of those pivotal moments in the early days.
Yeah, look, my early memories, I'd gone from making tons per day in New Zealand to making half a ton a week in Australia, if that, because the consumers didn't know what it was. The only people that were picking it up were ex-Kiwis, right? They knew what it was. So the Kiwi contingent knew what it was. So I had to launch this thing. I trying to find ways of, again, there wasn't Google or any of that stuff. So the internet, you couldn't get an influencer to tell you how good it was. You'd actually do it all yourself, basically. So I did a few deals with the radio stations, and I discovered that the Sunday Mail was quite effective, because everybody read the Sunday Mail, whether in the whole of Queensland, because there's only one Sunday paper, Sunday Mail. During the week and Saturdays, there's all regional papers and stuff, but everybody read the Sunday Mail when they're having a coffee in the morning. So we put an advert in the right-hand page, all that stuff that you learn. And it slowly got like this. And Coles were the first ones to embrace it. And then Woolworths after that embraced it. And I had to bare my soul to these buyers, head buyers, and basically say, if this doesn't work, I will, do whatever you think I should be doing. Run down the street with no clothes on, shouting, I'm an idiot, whatever you want me to do. But I promise you, this will work. And I remember saying to Brian Kennedy and Coles, I leant across the table. He said to me, I don't know if this is going to work. And I said, mate, trust me, it will work. I said, we will be not talking about a pallet here and there. We'll be talking truckloads. Trust me, I'll make this work. And he leant over the table and says, it had better fucking work. and he put us into the DC, and that was the start of the sort of wave that took us along. And then obviously when Woolworths saw it was happening, they got involved. But Coles were the partner in the beginning that actually embraced it the most. I did have the cheek to say to Woolworths later on, because I became a little bit of a character with them. They knew that whatever I said was going to happen, or that I would do, would happen. And all my customers knew that whatever TQ said, with his pencil and a bit of paper, it was going to happen. And they all enjoyed the ride that we went on, And I did say to Woolworths rather cheekily one year when we won Supplier of the Year, and I did say to them that perhaps they should consider calling themselves the fresh pet food people. Yeah, no, that didn't fly. But no, and so obviously the fresh pet food thing, got into the kangaroo world, which is a whole other story. The kangaroo business is something that I'm not really credited with that much, and I don't really care. But I changed the whole bush. The bush used to be full of cowboys with utes and guns, shooting kangaroos and selling them for the skins and making a bit of meat. And it was just a cowboy affair, the whole thing. But I changed it into a very profitable enterprise for everybody. It didn't go down easy, and there was a few threats along the way, but eventually, not eventually, like quite quickly, the good guys came to the surface, and it became a proper business, and people were making proper money. So I'm quite proud of myself and my general manager Rex Devandia. We both shared in that journey, and we're proud of what happened.
Despite a relatively shaky start in the first sort of 8 or 9 months, the business took off and was very popular here in Queensland. And then you bought a factory, I think, in Tasmania, and then others elsewhere. I think you opened 5 factories in the space of 9 years. Walk us through how you're able to get this unknown product into the sort of supermarkets on the shelves, and then what made it so popular?
Well, it was a good product, right? And nutritionally, it's probably the best pet food, right? I mean, canned pet food started off really well, but then because of the volume became very diluted, and there's not a lot of nutrition. In fact, if you read the back of a can, you've got to feed a poodle 2 big cans every day to get enough food into it. And then dry food, biscuits, dry food, that's not natural, right? They try and make it natural, and they make it sound natural, and it is the future, right? So all the technology is going into dry pet food, and it's convenient for the consumer and all that stuff. But here along comes fresh, chilled pet food. Well, that is the best natural-ish food. The closest thing to natural food you can feed your pet, apart from raw meat. And raw meat's good too, but a dog needs more than just raw meat. It needs a balanced diet, right? So you can't survive on just raw meat. So this concoction of meats and cereals and fats and carbohydrates and stuff that go into a balanced diet in a chilled dog roll is the best nutrition, right? So, but the guys that are making dry food and canned food are not going to tell you that. So it was up to me to tell you that. And I've got a relatively small voice, believe it or not. But we had to use all sorts of tactics to get it on the shelf. And once people got it, used it, they would use it again. So our customers became loyal. So the growth was organic. It just kept growing, right? Which is a good sign for any business, right? It's essential, right? And then we did different things, like the Chunkers was a new product with the balls, the meatballs, cooked meatballs. You know, you just have to innovate, because in the retail world, it's very difficult to get price increases. Very difficult. It's an arduous task, and it breaks a lot of suppliers. And it's a game that you have to play, and it's not an unknown game. It's a game that you have to play. And the supermarkets are experts at it, at defending their position. And so one of the easiest ways to get a margin increase is to have new product development. Because when you put a new product on the shelf, if you introduce a new product, it has a new margin target and range. So that's a trick of being in business, particularly when you're dealing with FMCG products, that you must have a constant supply. As an example, when I bought Darrell Lea, I said to the guys, I want 50 new products in 50 weeks. Like, that's essential if you're going to be successful. But I mean, there's lots of other things. Quirky advertising is good. Being in the right place at the right time. But without question, and I preach this to many people, without question, there's a few basic rules, right? surround yourself with good people. Yeah. If you're going to employ people, you pay 100 grand for a dud, you pay 120 for a superstar. It's pretty easy, isn't it? So the superstar is going to make you money, the dud is going to fucking lose you money. So surround yourself with good people. And as a business, there's a thing called DIFOT, right? Which is deliver in full on time. It's the single biggest key to success in business, in any business. I don't care what business you're in. If you're laying concrete paths and you say to me, I'll be there next Tuesday, we'll be finished by 2:00. If you do that, right, it's a good job, and you give me a value proposition, guess what? If I need another concrete path, I'm not going to phone this guy. I'm going to phone you again. And that's how you build a business. So you deliver whatever you've promised. And, I said in the beginning that I find business very simple. And I know that sounds a bit wanky, but I do. I find it simple. I find a lot of people involve consultants and get advice from people and read books and stuff like that. If you can't work it out on a fag packet, then it's probably not going to work. There needs to be margin. And, like I do preach, I do talks at Bond University and places like that. And I say to these kids, your brand. Think about your brand, because when you start your business, your brand's very important, because just think in 20 years' time, you're going to sell it. What does the brand look like in 20 years' time? So it can't be Tony Quinn Limited, because that's a name. You think about your brand, right? Second thing is, most important, is DIFOT. And we've discussed that. That is a absolute tick. Third thing, which is just as important, and a lot of people don't get, you've got to make margin. You've got to make margin. What's the point in practicing? You practice doing deals or what? No, you've got to make margin. And if you make good margin, you can employ good people and pay their mortgages for them, and you'll have a good business, successful business. So, so when I go to these talks, right, and I love it. I love the young kids' reactions and stuff like this. And a lot of them will come up to me afterwards, because they don't want to spread the news, but they say, what is the secret? What do you think? Where am I missing? Where should I be looking for the pink fairy dust or whatever it is, that makes a success, I said, really? I said, it's easy. I said, it's not complicated. I said, do you want me to tell you? And they all say, they sort of, yeah, just tell me. I said, well, it's easy. Here you go. Take it in, right? This is how it works, right? I said, there's 7 days in every week, right? Some day and one day don't count. Don't use them, right? So 7 days. Yeah. So they're with it. Yeah. Got that. Yeah. I said, you can work 7 days, but let's just say you work 6.5 days, right? Because you need a half day off to go see your mum, get a haircut, go and get some food, whatever you do in your half day. But you can work 6.5 days a week, yeah? Oh, yeah, okay. I said, you can work 12 hours a day. Yeah, you can work 12 hours a day. Easy. Honestly, lots of people do it. 12 hours a day. I said, I don't care what you're working at. It doesn't matter what you're working at. Whether you're putting up temporary fencing, whether you're driving a boat, it doesn't matter. If you do that for long enough, right? And I'm not talking a couple of months or a year. I may be talking a decade or two, right? You got to do that, right? At the end or during that time and towards the end of that time, you will be a world expert in whatever you're doing. People will come to you and ask advice and ask your opinion. And you will have a healthy life because you'll be working hard, you'll be making decisions all day, every day. You will not be a procrastinator, you'll be a decision maker, you'll get shit done. That's success. Money probably comes. If you do it well enough, money will come. Is that what you want to hear? Not really. What about if I did AI and fucking did a sparkle in the sky? I said, you're talking to the wrong fella. Honestly, my generation, no. I don't understand it. That's why my partner's 23 years younger than me. She can do that. And she does all that kind of stuff. But throughout life, business is one thing, and you could be good at business, and then you've got your family that you have to deal with. You know, like I've enjoyed a great family. You know, like my kids have been great. One of my biggest pleasures in life, one of my biggest achievements in life, was to make all my 4 children multimillionaires before they were 40 years old. And they all deserved it. They all came on the journey. They all believed in the faith and all the rest of it. And so I feel really proud about that, being able to do that. Now it's up to them. You know, they go and do their own thing, and their children have to deal with that. And the family moves to a different dynamic where, sadly, after 38 years, me and Christina split up. That's kind of happens nowadays. And then all the kids, some of them have split up and got other families, and it's a different dynamic altogether. And I'm learning to live with. I'm quite enjoying it, but it's different. It's not as traditional, and I think if you set off with a traditional business plan and a traditional family plan, I think you're going to be surprised.
Just back to VIP, and we'll close out this chapter shortly. By 2015, the business, I think, was profiting $1 million a week.
You're right, but as a combined entity, if you look at, because at the end, we had Darrell Lea as well, and so I think 80 million a year was the profit, and however that was divided up. But I think you're right. I think the pet food stroke kangaroo business was about 54, 55.
Incredible business.
Yeah.
What was when you reflect on that, what was some of the key learnings of that 21-year-old journey with VIP before we moved to Darrell Lea?
If I look at it and try and describe it to people, I say, look, VIP was my baby. It wasn't there before. So I created this VIP and nurtured it and sent it to school and fucking watch it fall off a bike, and it got into the teenage years and fucking became 21 years old. And probably when it was about 19 years old, one of the conundrums that I had was all my family were working in the business. All my 4 children were working in the business. And I wondered if that was actually what they wanted to do. And I didn't think it was. I'm not so sure now, but at the time, I thought they could have done something else. They're all good people. They're all hardworking, good, decent people. They could do anything. And really, I've got them working in the pet food business at whatever level. They're still in the pet food business. Is that really what they want to do? And my youngest son, Clark, he was making noises of doing his own thing or whatever, And so there's all this bit of a turmoil-y thing going on. My eldest daughter developed cancer and sadly passed away at 40 years old. And, so all these things were happening. And also you'd knocked on the door every 3 weeks, 3 months from PE guys that were valuing your business at fucking hundreds of millions, and you think, really? Fucking, you don't know this business. Anyway, and then Nestle came on board. And I felt good about talking to Nestle because I thought they will look after the brand. They're a good brand owner. They've got global ambitions. Although they're a big behemoth, they can make stuff happen, right? And so we wasted 12 months of our lives with Nestle. Is that how you say it, Nestle? That's how I say it. Yeah, Nestle. Anyway, they had engineers, consultants coming every week and auditors and due diligence experts and everybody coming down to go through the whole thing. Anyway, tick, 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 tick. We passed all the tests. So it had to go to Vevey in Switzerland to the National World Conference to get signed off by the then chairman. Anyway, the story goes, I wasn't there, but the story goes that the chairman's so pissed off with the team, he stood up and said, we are not buying one more business for you people to fuck up. Fix the businesses you've got before we have any more acquisition growth. And my deal was sitting on the table, you know. And so then you discover something else that's called deal fatigue, right? So the whole team, all of my team, were fatigued with this journey that Nestle had taken us on. And then for it to go, no, one guy makes a decision at the end of the day. We should have spoken to him first, you know. But anyway, he said, no, it's all over. Oh my God. So it took about 3 months for everybody, because, you know, humans are humans, right? They start counting out, you know, will I get a share of that? I'll maybe get, and we loosely talked about, you know, what kind of dividend the kids would get and the managers would get and stuff, you know, and it's healthy, you know, millions, you know, like going to people, and so they can't help themselves but start spending it, right? And then, of course, you're told, no, not happening. Oh. So there's a real drop in morale and everything else. And even my dad, who I used to, as I said before, he loved the politics side. He was invested in it. He was on the journey. Like, he was, what's happening this week? And to say to him, no, it's all done. He couldn't understand it. He said, well, how could that be? Like, you've spent a year on this, and what? Is that the first time somebody said, you know? I said, yeah, that's it. So anyway, there was always clowns going about, but we had a bit of a rest. And then, because the business was still going, and I was still betwixt and between as to what is the best thing to do with it. But anyway, we entertained a visit from Quadrant, and the guy, Chris Hadley, fronted it. And I found him to be the best operator I'd come across in that sphere. And basically he looked at me and said, is this a good business? I said, mate, it's a perfect business, I'm telling you. Right, okay. And that was kind of it, right? And I said, but don't try and reprice it at the end. I'm telling you, it's got to start with a 4. I'm telling you that. And so you know that that's the deal. So anyway, that was the deal. And he followed through all the way. And he's been a great, I've invested some of my money back in with him. And I think this story is quite well known now, that I left 10% in the business. And so the deal was done. It's amazing how you sign all these bits of paper. You know, it was a big boardroom desk thing with all these papers to sign all the way around. And that was it. That was it. It moved on to somebody else then. And, you know, you're expecting a phone call on Monday morning. Oh, back, the boiler's blowing up. What do we do? No. Radio silence, right? And they carried on, and they did a few things that I thought was a bit daft. But that's the new management, you know, coming in, doing the thing. And Chris phoned me up 2 years later and said, I think we can sell this business. I said, really? I said, you've only just got going. Like, you've spent 100 million on acquisitions. The turnover's grown 100 million, but the profits remain the same. You know, like, you going to sell it? He said, yeah, I think we can. I said, okay. I said, what do you think you get? He said, I reckon we'll get over $1 billion. I said, nah, mate, get out of town. Don't be stupid. He says, but I want you to do something for me. I said, yeah. He says, I want you to talk to the buyers, right? They want to talk to the originator guy to quiz him and blah, blah, blah. I said, no problem, mate. I'm in. If this is what we're talking about, count me in. Anything for the team, you know, like, hey, good. So anyway, I had this meeting with these group of people, and there's Chinese and Singaporean and fucking local, blah blah blah, and fucking 5,000 questions. Only 10 of them were real. The rest were just a repeat of the same question that they asked before, backwards, like that. And I was getting jack of it. I'd spent 3 hours, right? I'm saying, I've had enough. Like, job done. I'm not, and I'm over it. Like, I'm not interested anymore. Yeah, go away. You're not listening. Da, 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 da. Anyway, I got out of the meeting and did a good job, but I've had enough. God. We got to the meeting, I phoned Chris up and I said, mate, that was terrible. That was one of the worst meetings I've ever had in my life. Just, answering these stupid questions that these experts were asking and all that stuff. He says, I know. I said, what? He says, I spent 5 hours with him the day before. He said, I was about to walk out. I said, prick, you should have told me. But it was on the back of that deal, so signing up that deal for $1 billion. I mean, how good is that? I mean, to start from nothing, $1 billion. I mean, it wasn't all mine, but I was part of it. And people would say to me, "Oh, you're not pissed that you sold it at 400?" And then I said, "No way. I was delighted to sell it for 4. And I'm amazed that we sold it for how good's that? They're a different league. They're financial gymnastics people. However they do it, good on them. But prior to that, the sale, me and Christina separated, and for no good reason. It's whatever. And so we carried on with Darrell Lea, but I wasn't comfortable with the situation. So I was either going to try and buy Darrell Lea from Christina or sell it and then split the proceeds. Either way. So we'd try and sell it split first, because I didn't really want to pay the price that somebody else would have paid for it. Anyway, we put it in the market. There was 25. Here's a lesson for people. There was 25 interested parties, genuine interested parties. And the price was 200 million, blah, blah, blah. It was making 23, I think, or something. So it was a fair deal, great brand, fantastic brand. But I spoke to Chris, and he said, no, mate, no, it's sugar. It's a new tobacco. Not interested. I said, are you sure? It's a good brand, good business. You'll be able to do the chocolate thing. Blah, blah, blah. We've only just started. Like, we're not halfway through. I don't really want to sell it, but for the whole family structure thing, it's best I do. Oh, no. Anyway, we went from 25 interested parties down to 0, because the general perception was that we'd done such a good job that there was nothing left for anybody else, which is a trick in itself. Like, really? There's plenty more, but you can't see it, or you don't want to take that risk, or whatever it is. So that was an edge. So you should always make it look as if there's a lot more to do. Anyway, on the back of the $1 billion pet food deal, I said to JP at the time, I said, mate, you want to buy Darrell Lea? It's a good thing. It's the next $1 billion business you're going to find, And he said, okay, we'll have a look at it. And that was it. And they, in Chris's style, they came in, no mucking around. This is true. This is it. Yep. And we did vendor due diligence, which is a good plan to have. Saves a whole lot of time and effort. So I've become a bit of an expert at selling to PE, or even so my most recent sale of consequence, I've carried on doing lots of little bits and pieces. But I bought Mariani beef jerky in Casino for 35 million Australian, which came with a small entity in the UK. We bought another business in the UK for £6 million. So say the total thing was 50 million, just say, on thing. I sold the British one during COVID for 43 million quid, so $80 million. And I sold the Australian one to Jack Links in America for $70 million just last year, I think. Local legends. And I've got another couple on the go at the moment that are of similar, I call them bank robberies, mate. Like back in the day, there used to be a bunch of guys, 4 mates, put on balaclava, transit van, go down the high street, rob a bank, hopefully nobody gets hurt, take the cash. If you get away with it, happy days. It's a bank robbery, good one. So nowadays I call this, you buy a business that you see potential in, or you can grow it, or you can improve it somehow. You polish it up, you make it look good. And I've never sold a dud business, never. They've all been good businesses that people are more than happy with. What they do with them is their business. But, Jack Links phoned me up, Troy Links phoned me up a couple of months ago and said, mate, this is the best thing we've ever bought. Yes, I feel proud about that. I'm happy, they're happy, and the world moves on. Yeah, so I bought 65% of this small business, people working in it. Last year it grew 64%. It's going to do the same this year. So my initial investment was 9 million for 65%. We're going to sell that thing for 50 million next year. Yeah, it's just what I do, mate. And it would take another session, really, because we've just done a bit of a life story thing. But I can't explain how easy it is. I know it sounds wanky, right? But it is easy. It's people confuse things to keep their value, right? It's not that difficult.
What about the Darrell Lea business? I mean, the Quinn Quadrant partnership, if you want to call it, that's been incredibly fruitful for both parties. You've sold 2 businesses to them. Like you said, they sold VIP for over $1 billion. I think they're close to selling Darrell Lea for over $1 billion as well. When you bought Darrell Lea, it was losing, I think, $5 million a year.
$11 million a year.
$11 million a year. And then I think within the space of 12 months after you owning it, it made...
Space of 2 months.
2 months it was making a profit. How do you do that?
Well, you simply apply proper business brutal tactics. I mean, for example, they were making 700 products and 90% of them weren't making any margin. And you'd say, why are you making that? Oh, because we've always done that. Fucking hell. It's just, and when you've got no passion in it, you just say, well, not doing that anymore. Simple. Stop it. You go from 700 staff to 80 staff or something. Right? You just got to do it. And you've got to. So I personally went to the retailers and said, look, I just bought this Darrell Lea thing. It's got $100 million worth of sales in its 65 stores or whatever the hell it was, right? None of them making money. Shut all them down. They're gone. That's not going to happen. But I've got all these people, customers that want Darrell Lea products. Do you want to give us some shelf space in your stores to sell Darrell Lea? And that's not easy. Trust me. You've got Mars, you've got Nestle, you've got Allen's, you've got all these people fucking holding shelf space. Nah, fucking nah. And for us to get the shelf space, do you know why we got the shelf space? I can tell you. This is how simple business is, right? What did they do? They looked up the die foot of VIP. And thought, oh, VIP's in the top 10 companies that supply a high die foot score. Because the supermarkets score it, right? So every week you get a score of your die foot, right? So hang on a minute. These guys can actually supply our shelves. Because the worst thing for a supermarket is to give you shelf space and then you can't supply. For whatever reason. You can't fucking do it. And it's 5 phone calls and it's a truck that reverses back. Can you do it tomorrow morning? No, not interested. So they looked up the die foot score and go, oh, okay, we'll give you this. And also me fronting the thing and saying, this will happen. This is what I'm telling you. promising you this is what's going to happen. And in those days, 10 years ago, whatever, but, you know, I did have a reputation of making things happen. And people want to follow or go with a good leader, yeah? You know, people like that, you know, despite what they might think. They get confidence in that, and touch wood, whatever. Same with local legends, the jerky business. Same thing. If I say it's going to work, if I say we're going to take pork crackle and we're going to make it, and it's going to, yeah, okay. It's an easy win for them. Like, they don't have to work hard at that. There's not a big discussion, big decision. Yeah, okay. And go.
You touched on earlier the three pillars as you see them: brand, delivery, and margin for successful businesses. What about for retail or fast-moving consumer goods? What are the intricacies to run a successful retail business, do you think?
I'm not very good at retail, but here's the deal. You get 3 seconds, right, to get somebody's attention. There's no point in putting the 50 best things about your product on the front of the pack. You need to have claims or bullet points that, I mean, I'm involved in Motorsport now. Traditionally, they give them a driver's briefing sheet that's 2 pages long, A4. Nobody reads it, mate. Nobody, right? So what you want is one sheet with 3 preferably, 5 bullet points maximum. People will read that. People will take attention and they'll remember that. And, you know, obviously if you're in retail, the price is one thing, you know, depending on what market you're in. Bog off, buy one, get one free, whatever the deal is. And then so what we used to do when we had MPD, we would do the packaging and stuff, and we would actually mock up the pack, sneak it into, you know, take it to a supermarket when nobody's looking, fucking put the things on and stand back and see what it looks like. If it doesn't stand out and give a message, then you haven't got it right. So I don't know if that answers the retail thing. I've never really been that involved in retail. I've kind of avoided that. I've been busy doing other things.
It's a whole another discussion, but you're heavily involved in motorsport. You've got Hampton Downs, of course, in New Zealand, as well as Highlands Motorsport Park, as well as another motorsport facility there.
I'm going to be in trouble if I don't go, right? I'm just telling you.
So just reflecting on your career, and it's been an incredibly diverse career, what would you say have been the key lessons that you've learned?
You learn every day. There's lots of key lessons. And, you know, like, I go back to my original thing. How about we start with 2 simple rules, right? Don't repeat the same mistake. If you make a mistake, we're all human. We all make mistakes, right? Don't fucking do it again, right? Simple. Second thing is, surround yourself with good people. And that means, as best you can do it, family, friends, yeah, and then business associates and all of that stuff. I have no time for arseholes. In fact, nowadays I say, mate, you're a fucking arsehole. Fuck off. I'm not interested in what you have to say. I went in a meeting yesterday. This guy's going on about solar panels and how he's going to give 25% back on the invoice. I said, mate, that's hog shit. I'm a nuclear man. Give me nuclear. You're pissing in the wind with your solar. Fuck. Give me, when you're putting up nuclear plants, come and speak to me. Fuck off. I'm not interested. You're talking shit. You're wasting. You're a non-contributor. You're an irritant. Fucking get out of the way.
Love it. Tony Quinn, appreciate your time.